Hey guys, welcome back. Today is a dark day for me, no betting. But what I want to do is, I wanted to do a video that talked about handicapping days ahead of time, and what's some of the finer things about handicapping days ahead of time. What I did was I downloaded the past performances for Saratoga on Wednesday, and now some may look at it as a negative because it doesn't have any post positions yet, official post positions. So what you're looking at here is you're looking at horse that you don't know whether they're going to be coupled entries or not. Or sometimes you may not know that somebody might, on turf races, some of them might be entered as main track only. The way I look at it is, I just handicap it anyway. Okay, so if it's a turf race, and I see normally our main track entry horses are the ones way on the bottom. Actually, we have MTOs on here anyway, so that's good. But we don't have the post positions, and we don't have the morning line odds, which I really don't care about. The morning line odds, the post positions, it's very easy. Tomorrow, the post positions will be drawn. All you have to do now is go to Brisnet or DRF or whatever, and use the free service of clicking entries for Saratoga, and then you'll know what their post positions are. That way, when you go to your grid, your thorough grid, whatever one you're using, you'll know now which horses match up. If there's a 1A, if there's no 1A, if there's a 2B, whatever. So you don't have to worry about doing anything. Being that it's only Monday and these races aren't until Wednesday, I don't have to do anything with the thorough grid right now. All I can do is take my time, pick out my pace lines, figure out ahead of time which which races am I going to use for target and ability, and so on. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is, what do I do? Because someone had mentioned to me, in email, they said, well, I would like to be able to handicap a couple days ahead of time anyway, but I don't know what the weather is going to be like. Well, I'm going to let you in on a little, I don't want to call it a secret, but something that I prefer. I draw my target ratings off of the last race if I can, or the race back if I can't from the race before, no matter what the surface condition is, whether it was a sloppy track, fast track. I don't necessarily concern myself with that. The two factors that I use for an off track are, one, I will look for an ability rating if I can get one off of an off track, muddy or sloppy. And sometimes, guys, it's better to use a fast track than it is to use like a muddy track, for example, because a muddy track is actually slower than a sloppy track. A muddy track is more like, plucky, where the hooves are getting caught a little bit inside the mud, because it's not necessarily like what's the word I'm looking for? Completely drenched to where the bottom, when it's sloppy, it's wet on the top of the surface, but the bottom, there's still some hard ground for the horses to run off of. What happens is when the track starts to turn muddy, that wet stuff at the very top starts to solidify a little bit and it becomes muddy. So what happens is that becomes more plucky, where the hooves are actually getting caught in there a little bit, opposed to, like I said, a sloppy track where there's water on top, but underneath there's still a little bit of the track is still a little solid. What happens? The reason why they cancel cards when there's too much rain is because on that sloppy track, that lower layer, that lowest layer, that usually has a little bit of I guess solidity, is that a word to it? That starts to become plucky as well, and there's really no surface for the horses to run on. So I try to avoid muddy tracks, even on off days. Now you might say, well, what if the track is muddy that day? Well, then you know what, I do the best I can, because a lot of times you can't find muddy. You find fast, you can find sloppy. Sometimes you can't find sloppy. You find fast, you find muddy, and if it's sloppy, I use the fast track. Again, another intangible that you have to weave around, decision you have to make. I'm not telling you that's what you have to do, or that's what you should do. Some people like to skip races on those days. I prefer to skip the races that have been taken off the turf, as you saw yesterday. Yesterday's card, we when I took out the 2-year-old maiden special weights, I handicapped a 6-horse field, and we ended up only playing 3 races because of the 3 turf races that were taken off the turf. Now, the other thing I look for, the only other adjustment I make when I find out that it's going to be a wet track after I've already handicapped, I said already before, 1, I'll change the ability number if I can. And 2, when I do my speed cumulative, instead of using the fast figure, I go off of the off figure. Okay? And that's it. They're the only 2 adjustments I'm going to make. Other than that, I'm rolling with my picks into that day, raining or not. And races that are taken off the turf, I'm just tossing them races and not playing them. Okay? Now, let's take a look here at some of the things that I like to do a couple days ahead of time. 1, I can take my time and I can really go with each horse and make sure that I'm not missing any 18% or higher in the training categories. Now, once again, you use whatever training categories you want. I don't like to use the general categories like sprint, like the race type sprints, the surface type dirts, even the type of races, the class of race. I like to use unique factors that meet that particular horse that day. Like, for example, this horse is coming second off the layoff. What has this trainer done with a legitimate sample size? I look for at least 20 races. What has this horse done with at least 20 races? Or not the horse, the trainer. And I look for 18% or better. And then I'll identify it. So I'll go down, and the next thing I'll do is I'll look for all the trainer. 90 plus days away, that's a unique stat, 12%. Second time Lasix, that's a unique stat. I will identify that. Nothing here. 46 to 90 days away, 19%. Out of 157, I'll take it. Second career race, just misses the bar for me. You got to set the bar somewhere, right, guys? And you got to stay loyal to your wherever you set it. I already did this one. 46 to 90 days away. Second career race, there's an 18%. And then what I do is I'll start working up again now. And I'll decide what else am I looking for. There's not going to be any class drops because this is a maiden special weight. So I'll look over here. Do we have any key races or next out winners? 2 back we had a next out winner. But it wouldn't have been worthy of a notation because he didn't run it. He didn't run well in any parts of that race. Sorry, I always get a phone call in the middle of videos. I go up, and again, I'm looking here, and I'll check a move out. I see a two length move here on the turn, and there is a stretch move here, but at the same time, it's not. I'm looking for at least a length on the stretch, and we also lost a position, and I prefer a position gain, at least one, and at least one length gained. I'll also look for any type of comment where I could say I can toss this last race. Because you do want to be careful on tossing races. You might say, well, listen, this race should be a toss. Because he ran poorly. Well, these are horses that haven't won yet. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he ran that poorly for a reason. This horse may be a horse that doesn't break its maiden for another 10 races. You don't know. You can't predict that. But at the same time, you don't want to just toss a race just to toss it. Because then now you're working with 2 races left for an ability race. So you're going to have to pull an ability figure anyway from one of them. So I would just leave that as is and just run the numbers off of that particular race. Okay, we do have a stretch move here. Fourth, out by 10. Finished second, out by 6 3/4. So that was a 3 1/4 length move. Nothing over here. And then finally back to the top. Nothing. I could identify the speed of the race, even though I do not, on this particular grid, the TC rating grid, I do not give any points for the speed of the race, unless he's a class dropper. If it's a class drop and speed, I'll give the extra point, 2 points, and if not, I'll give him the a one for the class drop. But I haven't been given any points for the speed of the race. Now, we look at the grid real fast, and let me pull this up. I'm on my BrizNet screen. Let's look at the grid, and the grid, come on, work with me here. Give it a second. I think I need to exit out of Chrome soon and let it read. Okay, we look at the grid, and let's go to a blank grid. There we go. And when I'm using the thorough capping grids, or I'm sorry, when I'm using the TC rating grids, I like to keep the races from the past. So all I do is I go and I paint a black line to separate a new day. I'll put the date, which will be August 2nd for Wednesday. I'll put it right here. I'll throw it in bold. Now, any races I do on August 2nd, I will just continue down here. Also, I wanted to make sure that you guys could see the tabs on the bottom. The actual thorough grid that you get with thorough capping, thorough grids, that when you download it from the slide, and I did highlight this on another video, you have your normal original grids, where again, if you're handicapping 2 or 3 days ahead of time, you could take your time and you could use these grids. These are the grids that are highlighted in the actual tutorial that include the pace, the feet per second, pace, velocity, the qualitative standards over here to the left, where we're just putting notes in, such as trainer move, or trainer rating, turn move, so forth. Target and ability. We do not deal with speed cumulatives. You could, again, if you have the savvy of adding columns, you can just go and add in your target buyer to this. You can add even your speed cum to this. I didn't do it on the actual grid that you guys are downloading. You have your evaluations, you have your rankings. You have ranking 1, ranking 2, ranking 3, and then your final ranking. And then you also have access now to, if you notice, I have 4 full tabs of the original thorough grids, thorough capping grids. And as you can see, my computer is so slow here. Come on, work with me here. Nobody wants to sit here and watch this scroll. I apologize, guys. But you have 4 full pages of about 30 to 40 grids on each page of the originals. Then I've also included the follow the figure grids right here if you're playing around with the follow the figures program. And the follow the figures program, as you can see on the chart, I have a note saying email me at thoroughcap@gmail if you're interested in a complimentary copy of Follow the Figures or the Matrix System. I've been sending out the Matrix System automatically. So if you order thorough capping, you're getting the Matrix System emailed to you as well. And then if you want Follow the Figures to play around with that, and these are the grids for Follow the Figures, they're also included in the thorough capping downloadable grid. I've also included Jim Lahane's calibration handicapping resource, where you're equating mile 16th final times to an actual quarter mile. That's included on there. We also have some summary grids. Summary grids were the ones I did a few videos on, where all we're doing is we're taking the top horse in each category, and we're putting the horse in there. So let's say it was the 6, the 4, the 4, the 2, and the 6. And then once we did the pace and velocity, top factor X, let's say it was the 6, 2, 3, 2. And then we have our qualitative factors over here. And based on this grid, all you're doing is going across and you're looking for the numbers that are repeating themselves. And then you're ranking them based on your preference and so forth. You put your contenders over here and your selections. So that was summary grids number 1. And then we have our summary grids 2. Summary grids 2 is when we went and we kind of piggybacked off of this, and we went and left a space for 2 horses. Top target, second target, top ability, second ability, so forth, in most of the categories. And then over here, the turn moves, if there was multiple horses, we'd go like 2 into 4. Stretch move, let's say there was the 1. Say there was 2 horses coming out of a key race, 4 into 5. And then same thing, we had the group of horses, but then we decided, well, wait a second. We have all these numbers now, but, they're not in any particular, order. We have to go by the eyes now and decide, okay, the 4 is showing up a lot. And that's when I came up with the charts with the TC rating grids, which I've been using lately. All that same information goes in here for every horse, though. And then we go by the TC ratings and we also go by the factors over here. And if you've been watching my latest videos, you know exactly how we run these. Really, the purpose of this was to show you all the grids that are actually in the thorough capping, because what I'm getting is I'm getting some emails from people that are saying, I've ordered the thorough capping, but where do I find this particular grid? They're all on the tabs on the bottom. Okay, you just look through, and I even have a grid set up where it's the pace grids only. So if you want to run the pace figures, the Sarton velocity pace figures, you can do that as well for each particular race, or certain races that you want to do it in. I skip some of the races. I don't do the velocity for some of them. And then once again, if you're savvy enough, you go and take your grids once you downloaded them, and if you want, you go and you create your own columns. Maybe you create another set of columns for the early velocity, sustained pace, overall pace, and so on. And if you want, and you know how to do it, you just tie it right into the TC rating as well. That way it'll change that number. I haven't done that with any of my grids. Right now, I am I've been very successful and consistent with my return on investments using simply this grid here. And I don't want to skew numbers by adding in more stuff to it that I don't necessarily feel I need to use right now. That's one of the things you get a lot of these software programs that you order or that you purchase or get a subscription for. One of the selling points they use is over 85 factors figured into the program each race. Well, then the more factors you have, the more you have to figure out, okay, how am I going to sort this? How am I going to filter it? Because no matter what, every result of a race, you could use if you're using a system with 85 factors, every result you could point to the winner somehow, some way afterwards, after the fact. Oh, if I would have just sorted by top pedigree and second best trainer on grass and the highest endurance horse, I would have had the winner. Well, yeah. But at the same time, it's nice to know that ahead of time, because the next race, there might be totally different factors that are going to determine the winner of the race. So if you could find something clear, cut, and dry, like we're doing, even though there's a little bit of a grind here, you got to do the work and you got to do it yourself. But I said it before, I think there's nothing more rewarding than just being able to do your own grind and do your own work, trust your numbers, trust your handicapping, and then in the end coming out with winners. I mean, that's rewarding in itself. Let's go back to the PPs, and where would I go from here? Well, right now, 2 days ahead of time, I'm not even worried about going over to my grid. Because again, I don't know if there's any coupled entries right now. I don't know if there's 1A. I don't want to start putting data into a grid for the 2-horse where this is actually the 1A, and then I have to go and switch it all up at the end. But being that it's only Monday, I'm not worried about this grid right now. I can take my time. I can start doing target ratings. I could skip and go down here and start just doing all the qualitative stuff for all the races. Let's do that. Let's go 5.5 furlongs on the turf. Shipper, I'll use the shipper, 18%. Drops off the win, 50%, 3 of 6. But again, I'm looking for a better sample size. Winner last out, 20%. I do have a 2-length move here on the turn. And I have a 2 lengths gain on the stretch, so he's got a double move in this race. Nothing over here. We have a class drop, 32,000, optional claimant 40,000 from Indiana. I leave it as is right now. I'm looking for a little more of a significant. Here's a somewhat significant. It's 1 drop in level. But the reason I'm identifying that is because he is a speed horse. So I want to look and see what's the bet. This is on 7.5 furlongs, so this is going to be 2 turns to 1. So I got to be mindful when I do my target rating now. I'm going to take 3 points off that target. So I go 1, I'm going to draw my target rating off the closest call to today's distance. I'm not going to go all the way to the 7 furlong finish here. I'll draw it off the stretch. And what we have here is we got 3, 4, 5. That's a 95. 5 points off of 108. But I will add 3 points for the difference in distance. This was a longer race. Energy was distributed differently. This wasn't the finish, so he wasn't going all out for a final quarter here. So I'm going to give the 3 points there. Okay, get a 98, and then I'll draw my target Briz number off of the 98, which would be a 173. And then what I want to do is I want to find an ability rating that's, if I can, at 5.5 furlongs. If I can't, I'm going to go as close as I can. I'll do the 6. There's a 5. I want to do more. If I can, I want to do longer than today's race, instead of shorter than today's race. If I can't find a 5.5, so I'll use the 6 furlongs. There's 1. There's a 107.4, which is actually a 101. But then he was 4 lengths behind, so that's a 97. 97 would be my ability there. And again, my goal here is not to teach you how to figure out ability. Those that know how to do it, you're probably following along perfectly to what I'm talking about right now. But that's how I would do the intangible of not having a 5.5 furlong. That's what I would come up with right there for the target ability and target Briz number. But back to the qualitatives. Scan. Here's a 22% off of 51. This horse is coming out of the next out winner race. So I'll identify that. Okay, now we have, this is a mile quarter race. Now we're dealing with a horse that's coming off of 5 straight route races. Well, I'm going to toss the 1.25 miles. Actually, I don't want to toss the 1.25 miles because out of these 2, I'd rather toss the synthetic race than the turf race. But at the same time, a mile and a quarter, again, the energy is going to be distributed a lot differently. We have to take a look at this number that we're using, and we have to make some sort of adjustment. So I would take that 111 and 3 if I'm doing a target. That would be a 15, 16, 18. Second call. Actually, the first call. I would use the first call and not the second call, because in a marathon race, there is no three-quarter call. It goes from the half all the way to the mile. And that's another thing that's I'd have to question. I'd have to say, okay, well, how about this mile 70 on the synthetic? I can get a 6 furlong call off of the mile 70 because it's right here. And what I tend to do is I tend to just add 3 points to the synthetic time to equate to a turf time. So watch what I do here. This is a 2-turn race. Today's a 1-turn race. I got to account for 2 things. One, that 2-turn to 1-turn, and I also account for synthetic to turf. But first I'm going to start off with my normal. That would be a 23, 24. That'd be a 76. I'm going to add the 3 points for the 2-turn to 1. That'd be a 79. And I'm going to add the 5 points for I'm going to add 5 points for the 2-turn to 1. Sorry. And then I'm going to add the 3 more points for the surfing. So I'm going to add a total of 8 points to that 76, which would give this horse an 84 on the target rating. And again, I'll go over that again. I had to decide between these 2 races to use as a target. I could have pulled the number off of here, a mile quarter race, but there is no 6 furlong call. Okay? I can get a general idea. I can maybe split the difference here and go 2. And I would go 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. That would be an 80. And then for the change in distance, I'd have to decide, well, how much of a difference do I make now from a mile and quarter to 5.5? That's a big difference there. So I might even have to add 10 points to that. Or I could go back to a race that's a little bit closer, even though it was on synthetic, and I could draw my target rating off of 112 and 3, which is off of 108. That's a 23. Plus 1 length off is a 24. That's a 76. 2 turns to 1, I add 5 automatically. That'd be an 81. Synthetic to turf, I add 3 more, which would be an 84. And I did a video where, just a few videos back, you'll see adjustments to target ratings, and that's one of the things I talked about. So this is an example where I had to do a double adjustment here. Okay? Then I would just draw my target Briz off of that, 155. And then I want to find if I can, there's a 5.5 furlong race. 6 off of 102 is my standard. And that's a 94 for ability. And that would be the numbers I would live and die with on that horse. Okay, back to qualitative. Third off layoff, 26%. We go down here. Did I miss anything over here? I mean, 2 back. I don't know if I would include that. Because again, it's not indicative of today's surface or today's distance. But just so you see, this is a key race. Now, that would be up to you. You may want to put this horse down as a key race horse. I wouldn't. These call lines are not important right here, because that is indeed the race you use for his target. It was a key race, but at the same time, I don't know. It doesn't match today as much as I needed to. So I'm going to take that out of there. I'm not going to identify that race as a key race. Okay, 6 furlongs. I'm not going to do any more target ratings, but That's the race I would use. We have a 46 to 90 days away, 20%. No moves. Definite class drop though. Did we check class drop here? We had a class drop here as well. Okay, nothing here. But one of the things you should be learning using these methods is never let your eyes tell you, oh, that was a terrible race. Because, draw the figures off of it, okay? Because you may be dealing with a very, very fast time here, and then when you figure out the target rating, it puts that horse right in the mix with everybody else's target ratings. And therefore, it's going to put the TC ratings right in the mix with everybody else. Don't let your eyes tell you, oh, that horse just consistently lost lengths throughout this entire race, totally was out of it, because that's how you miss out on long shots. You do the math, do the numbers. It's not always about, you know, having a first, second, or third here or here. Okay, it's about the pace and what the horse was running against that particular day. And it's kind of a hidden way to identify pace as well, without having to draw the pace figures. Just by pulling up these ratings, target ratings, the target Briz, and just let your numbers tell you what direction to go in the end when you're doing your final evaluation. Okay, another thing, if you notice, I do not look at workouts in races and for horses that have been running consistently. I'm not even concerned about them. I know some people are. Some people subscribe to Clocker's Report and everything and look at them, but I don't. I'm not saying it's the right thing or the wrong thing. But there's already enough stuff that I look at that I don't need to look at anymore. We have another horse that looks like he could be on the lead. We have a 21-3, 44-4. And he's also dropping in class here. A big drop, not from the 40,000 like this other horse. And we also have a better quarter and half here. So this course may very well be the speed of the race. And he's making a big drop. So you might want to keep an eye on this Lyrical Poet. Could be a drop-down speed horse. Now, I look at odds over here, and I see that this horse has been either favorite or close to the favorite. So this horse will probably be the morning line favorite in this race. So be it. If he is, he is. If not, maybe we can try to beat him somewhere else. And then finally, we have the last horse here. After 5, nothing here, nothing here, nothing here, and then right away I could toss these main track only, because if this race does go onto the turf, onto the main track, I'm not playing it anyway. And that's it. I have my shell right now to work with when I want to move on to the stage of figuring out. Now, what I normally do is after about 3 or 4 races, I start getting a little, my eyes start getting a little bugged out with the whole qualitative things. I go back to the top now and say, let's do the numbers. Let's draw the numbers off of 3 or 4 races that I already scanned. And then once I finished all of them, now I can go back down to race number 5 now, or 4, or whatever we're at, and I can start qualitative again. But the good thing about it is I can always take a break, put this away till tonight, even till tomorrow, and continue where I left off. And that's where you can break your handicapping up, and it doesn't seem like as much of a grind as it does if you're trying to do this in 2.5 hours or 3 hours. All right, I'm not going to make this video any longer, but I just wanted to share some insight as far as looking into the races a couple days ahead of time. I apologize for certain parts of the video not being so clear. Once again, most of my videos are not scripted ahead of time, where I already have an outline of what I want to cover. I just kind of do things on the fly. But again, as usual, questions, comments, put them in the video. Put them in the Discord. If you're in the Discord, if not, feel free to join. The invite link is below in the description. All right, I'll talk to you soon.